to the cloud. Okay, you know, and I'll mute everyone, and then George, you can unmute.
So you could find out about that one.
I think I heard about that. That's one of the adjuncts to Staten Island Hospital North. It's one of the other buildings to the south.
Right? North, yeah, it's by North.
Okay, George, please unmute and we're ready to begin. All right, George, can you hear me?
Yep.
Good, okay. Now,
can we share the screen?
Yeah, well, I'll put the screen on, I'll put it on full screen. Okay, now you can screen share, and then it looks like the Brady Bunch.
Hold on.
Okay, you screen sharing.
There's your show. That's the first picture right there, once it opens. I got to get it to the right opening program here. Just a second. Hold on. We're looking for the viewer, the right viewer. There we go. There we go.
Good.
Very plain stuff. So can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Can everyone else hear?
Are we starting now?
Yeah, you might as well go because I am recording.
Okay. All right. Well, this show was done originally by the Boston Street Railway Association on March the 7th of 2020. If you notice the date, that was the very last live meeting the BSRA had in its long storied history going back to 1959. Of course, after the coronavirus stuff started, their venue closed down. Right now, they don't have any place to have live meetings if they could. Okay. So everything's been online, just like you guys since then. So that show was done actually in early June of 2019. I did the RRE show on late June of 2019 at Grand Central. So when I was setting up the show that night, this was on the computer and somebody saw it because it got projected in the room. And they said, "Hey, that looks like good stuff." I said, "Well, do you want to see this one too?" And Peter said, "Sure. How about next week, June 26, 2020? Well, of course, we never happened. Okay. So this is the makeup for the June 26, 2020 meeting. We did not have, which of course means, as always, there's any show you want at least once a year. Okay. So if we're going to do this one tonight, let me know what else you want to do in the future. We can do something else. What this show is called Midwest Part 1. There was two trips done to the Midwest in 2019, which of course are the last ones that were done so far. I'm hoping to make one for 2021. We don't know yet. Okay. And the idea of this trip, basically, the goal was to go to the National Museum of Transport near St. Louis in Kirkwood, Missouri, to look over up close, take some pictures of Hudson and Manhattan number 256, which the two organizations have considered and somewhat discussed eventually transferring 250 to Shoreline Trolley Museum, where it would then join Alan Zalazzo's already 503. That's a J-class car, which is one of the last series they had. The 256 that's in St. Louis has been sitting there since 1965. It was sent there by the Hudson and Manhattan, or actually PATH by then. It was sent to the St. Louis Car Company to be a pattern more than anything when they were fleshing out the design for what became the PA1 that was delivered in 1965. And the PA1, 2, and 3 cars came in the 60s and early 70s, okay? All it was just a pattern because they had to do the detail for the clearances for the PA1s versus what the conceptual design was, okay? So 256 just sat there. They were going to scrap it, and the owner of the NMOT bought it. And what he did is he brought it to the museum, but he never had any designs to run it. It was just going to be a display. He stripped the thing. They took out the motors. They took out the controller. It's basically just a body, okay? And it's been sitting there since 1967. I think they moved it to the museum. It was sitting on the snow for years. The body's kind of, you know, in tough shape. To be honest with you, it looks almost the same as 503 did when it got to Branford in the late 1970s, okay? And if you know, Alan Zalazzo's been trying to restore that car for 40 years now, and it's almost finished, okay? So when he's done with 503, which will be very shortly, he would love to start 256, because if he could restore that, I don't think it's going to be done before he leaves us, you know? It'll take too long, okay? Anyway, that was the reason for the trip. So on the way to St. Louis, we were going to go to Pittsburgh for the first stop, Columbus, second stop. Third stop was supposed to be Dayton, Ohio, to see the prototype dual mode vehicles they have that are replacing the trolley buses. They already did that, but it didn't quite work out. And of course, the day we were going to be in Dayton, 2 days before we were there, they had tornadoes in Dayton that were devastating. So the trolleybus system was shut down for the whole summer. They had a lot of wire damage. Dayton Light and Power wouldn't even let them turn on the power for the whole system because about 20% of the system of Dayton was out of power for over a week after the tornadoes, okay? I put some damage pictures in there just to give you an idea of what we were going into. We got to the hotel in Dayton. We stayed there because we had the reservation. They were telling us all the stories about watching the tornado go down the other, going by the next side of the highway. That's I-75, I think it is. It was going right next to them across the highway. They could see the debris and the cloud and everything, but it never hit them at the hotel, okay? That's how close it was. Anyway, so then we also went to Cincinnati to see the new streetcar there. Went to St. Louis, back to Cincinnati again by a different route because the guy I was traveling with is a fellow named Mike Miller who lives in Manhattan. And Mike had never been in the state of Kentucky, so we made a special trip just to go I-64 through Kentucky so he could see on the flyby, see Louisville, Kentucky. He'd never been there, okay? And then we went back to Cincinnati, then from Cincinnati back up through Columbus, and then finally back to Pittsburgh again, and then back to, we stopped at the Orsobian, Pennsylvania, at the Trolley Museum on the way home. That was our last stop. So anyway, this is day by day. It's in chronological order by the way the pictures are taken, okay? And we're trying to explain basically why the pictures that were taken. It was for various reasons, because I have a Flickr page that tries to show you the whole light rail system in Pittsburgh as it would look today, and some older images of how it looked in the 1980s, okay? So a lot of the pictures that I had that were considered to be current were taken in the 1980s, and they're way too old to use now. So I had to go back and retake the light rail system. One trip I had to go to do the blue line, which is the Overbrook side. That's on the right-hand side. I hope you can see can you see my pointer here? On the picture?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, so that's my picture, very perfunctory. This is the Overbrook side over here. That's the old Pittsburgh and Castle Channel Railroad side. And this is the Mount Lebanon side over here, okay? So the blue line side we did in June. I went back again and took another trip in September of 2019 on the way home from Indiana, and we did the red line at another time, okay? Now, since this was done, what happened is Port Authority rebranded the light rail system. So this branch down here, the library branch, now is the Silver Line, okay? So now you've got three colors. You've got the red line, which goes from South Hills down here, up the Mount Lebanon side. You got the South Hills branch that goes up the Overbrook side. And then you got the Silver Line that goes from the library and then in by through the Overbrook. Okay. And they all join to meet downtown to go to the north side now. So that's basically the way the system looked at it was in 2019. And more or less, that's the way it is now. The only difference is on the roll signs, the LRVs just say Silver Line now instead of Blue Line. That's the only difference. Okay. It's just semantics. So anyway, finally we get to a picture. Okay. They're all self-captioned like this one. Okay. So what this shows you is the model of car. There's two types of LRVs in Pittsburgh. The SD400R, which was actually an SD400 when it was built. They were made by Duvag in the mid-1980s, and then were rebuilt by CAF up in, they shipped them to Elmira Heights in New York State. And they did a rebuilding on this to make them compatible with new cars CAF was building. They're 4300 series. They're simply known as LRVs. They don't have a model per se, okay? But anyway, so this starts the morning we went around the Overbrook line to get update versions of the older pictures that I had. I think some of them have been integrated to Flickr, but I haven't really had the time to do that with all the coronavirus stuff going on since that, okay? So what you're seeing is just basically what I was taking new and, you know, stuff I hope to post when I get time. So, and if I can, I tried to overlay a photo that I had taken there years before. Those would have all been slides, which of course I have to scan and everything else, okay? So some of them have PCCs all of a sudden, and you'll see why, okay? So Killarney was one of the stations we selected to take the images at in general, okay? There's a series of, it's just a train passing by. It's on a Saturday morning, okay? Now, one thing to note right away off the go here, in Pittsburgh, since the coronavirus with their revised schedules, I think it started in, I think at the latest it started in June of 2020, if not maybe May. They discontinued two-car train operations, okay? So every car since now coming on a year has been one single car. That's it. So you won't see pictures like this these days unless they get to the ridership back to the point where they can justify two-car trains, okay? Now, what you're looking at, let me see here now. If you'll notice on the right-hand side, I'm pointing to the screen. You can't see that. There's the pointer, okay? You see the line of trees up here on the right-hand side, okay? And that gentle rise there in the background. So on the next one, if you notice, there's a gentle rise and there's your trees on the right-hand side. So that's the same place that picture was taken. Let's see, this would have been 30 years before, 1989, okay? And this gives you an idea about the Overbrook line in Pittsburgh. The modern Overbrook line is what you'd call overbuilt facilities, okay? This thing has been running since 1903, I believe, as a trolley line. And none of these locations you see here, they're all in the middle of the woods, basically. If they're lucky, they might get 40 people a day as passengers, and that's it, okay? But they got this thing built for high platform because of ADA needs and because of the two-car trains. And, you know, they're using a shadow of this facility, and they have been from the day it opened, okay? And if you'll notice, there's a lot of rust here, and there's a lot of cement spalling and everything else. So by this time, it's 15 years old. It's starting to show some age already, okay? These yellow pylons here in the middle, this is their version of a pantograph gate like you have in a subway train so that passengers can't fall in between the two cars when there's a two-car train, because the barrier is not on the train, the barrier is on the platform. That's a safety feature, okay? So you'll see those everywhere. Same thing out here. That's to try to prevent people from following out of the front of the train, okay? So McNeely's the next stop. I think, let me see now. Yes, this is the same thing here. If you'll notice the curve here going around the right-hand curve, When they rebuilt this line, they raised the elevation in this area, and they did away with the old bridge. So in the next slide, you'll see this right-hand curve here in the background, and that's where you are here, okay? So this was all destroyed when they rebuilt it, probably in the early 2000s when they did this over. It was built for the Pittsburgh and Castle Shannon Railroad in the 1880s. This particular bridge was opened when they first converted it to a trolley line. It was joint use with the railroad at the time. It used to have dual gauge track. Anyway, that was built in 1903, okay, for what it's worth. And that's just other, versions at the same place, basically. So the next one is Denise, which did not exist back in the day, but the location basically did. It was called Smith Road. And there's a little story about this. Now, this is a hillside, this right-of-way. It's like a shelf on a hillside. And it was always weakly constructed, even going back to the days of a railroad time. It always had a habit of sliding down the hill every winter time. Every time there was heavy rain, whatever, it got smaller and smaller, okay, as time went on. So I'm going to show you the next picture here. No, okay, that's another shot in the same place going the other way. Okay, this is basically how this used to look. So you'll see how it's very narrow on the side of the hill there, okay? And around the corner, there was a siding there that was about, when I first saw it, it was about 300 feet long. That was in 1986. By then, it had been cut down year by year or decade by decade. It got cut down probably 10 to 15 feet an increment, okay? So anyway, in 1988, they had a major landfall there. So it lost almost a whole 100 foot. They had to cut it down, okay? So the Port Authority track people called it, and of course it had been called that before. They used to know it as the sliding siding. How Pittsburgh is that, okay, for names? So right around the corner was the sliding siding, okay? And that's how Denise was rebuilt for the light rail. This isn't even the old right-of-way. Like I said, they elevated it, they uncut it some. What they did is they put a concrete reinforcement on the hillside to keep the to basically to stabilize the whole thing, okay? And all this was opened in 2004. You'd never notice today what things, if you rode the old line that ran till 1993, you wouldn't even recognize where you were now. Okay? Bon Air is another station that they had at the time. And I believe in the background there, again, you see the left-hand curve way back here with the trees in the background, where this concrete retaining wall is. That was on the trolley time, that was a rise and a fall and a curve, okay? They flattened the whole thing out and just basically reconstructed the whole thing now. So anyway, like I say, that's a northbound, that's a southbound. Yeah, there's that left-hand curve there. And I think if you look carefully at that background left-hand curve, this is the curve right here, same place, okay? The only difference is when this picture was taken, the track was probably about 8 to 10 feet higher than it is now because they flattened the up and down that went on either side of this curve, okay? And in the background here, you can see another siding there. There was another trestle there. That's long gone now, okay? So anyway, that's what Bon Air is like today. It's in the middle of the woods. Like I said, probably Bon Air, even on a good day, they might get 25 passengers or something like that, okay? Probably a lot less now. That's Boggs, which is the first stop beyond South Hills Junction. Again, it's on the side of a hill, and it wasn't quite as drastic as Bon Air was, but they still had to raise the grade here quite a bit. So you'll see, here you see the right-hand curve in the background. It's on a hillside, and not this one here, but I believe it's after this one. You'll see, yes, that's what the PCC used to be, in the same place there in the background. See back here? So the old Bog Station was right where that part of the crossover is now. That's exactly that location right there, okay? So you see, like I said, it was quite a bit of engineering that went into this work when they rebuilt it. It took almost 5 years as a project once they got it started. It closed in 1993, and the Port Authority at first just wanted to abandon the whole thing. And basically, the local politicians got involved. The Port Authority people kind of slowly came on board. And then eventually the federal government, that was during 43 Bush, they offered the, I think it was a 50% federal participation, and the Port Authority got state funding for some of the rest of it. So the Port Authority itself, the county area, the local Pittsburgh area, had the smallest share, and they're going to get the benefit. So why not? Okay. And it also gave them a little bit of an excuse at the time to rebuild because of the expanded mileage. They had to get new cars to expand the fleet. So they got 28 new LRVs from CAF, which by then gave them more or less an excuse, quote unquote, to upgrade the existing LRVs, these here, the 4200s, because by then those were coming on 20 years old and they were starting to wear out. And the design had a lot of problems from the start, okay? So they said, well, look, we can correct the design problems, upgrade them, and, you know, renew them for another 20 years, which of course is now starting to expire as it is, okay? So another little thing here, the Port Authority now is saying they're going to try to raise over the next 5 years up to $500 million to acquire a new fleet to replace both series, the 4200s and 4300s. And as we speak, they have been already talking to Siemens. Siemens, of course, is the successor to Duvag that made the cars. And they want to try to basically just get a modern version of what they've got. CAF, of course, didn't work out as a builder to begin with, so I think they're out of the picture. But you still have to bid it, so you can't just say to Siemens, we want those. You know, you have to make it available for competitors to be able to bid on them if they can. So we're not quite sure that's going to work out. However, another little quirk is that as they talk to Siemens to replace the LRVs now, well, the St. Louis Metro Link is starting to talk about another fleet to replace them as well. Their cars are exactly the same as what's in Pittsburgh. You'll see that when we get there. The only difference between the St. Louis car and this car is the headlights are in a different location and they have an extra door right here. That's it. Everything exactly the same otherwise. However, the St. Louis version is still built as the original Duvag constructed car was that delivered in 1985. These have been reconfigured by CAF back in 2003, around then. So all that's left of that is the body now, okay? So they want to do a joint acquisition with St. Louis now to expand the pool between the two operators, and that'll make them get a cheaper price when it goes to the contract. At least that's the hope. So anyway, and some of these cars are being, well, a couple of them are retired. One had a very serious accident. I think it was 4208. That's the only one that LRV so far at PCC that's been retired per se. There's another one that was retired, but the reason they really retired them is because CAF did not provide enough parts for the long term. So they're short on parts for both types. And what they do is they cycle the LRVs around. They'll take the parts off some, put them in another one, put the other one back together. It's like a rolling circle. Okay. So anyway, this is one of the LRVs they had. It was specially body wrapped to try to spoof a PCC. That was for the 50th anniversary of the Port Authority in 2014. Okay. But this is 5 years after that, and it's still there on 2021, although it's very badly faded now, but it's still there, okay? That's just a standard interior of a rebuilt Duvag, much different than they would have looked when they were new if you were on them then. The guy looking at you there is Devin Mooney. He's a local rail fan. We call him the Leprechaun. I think you can see why. Anyway, he's everybody at the Port Authority basically knows the guy. He's a smart kid. He's probably going to go to Carnegie when he starts college next year, okay? I expect in the future this will be a future executive, what do you call him? Chief executive for the Port Authority of Allegheny County, okay? We'll see in 10 years or so. Anyway, we went up to at what used to be Castle Shannon. If you went to the Trolleys in the day back in the 70s and 80s, you would have went to the municipal building at Castle Shannon, which is no longer there. The only thing that's left that even told you was there is this memorial here. This is in 2019. It was saved from the building when they demolished it, when they rebuilt the light rail back around 2001 or so, okay? So this is Willow Station. It would have been previously known as Castle Shannon Station on the Overbrook side. There's another light rail station called Castle Shannon, which is to the left of this picture. It's on the other route through Mount Lebanon. You won't see that here because that's another different batch of pictures, okay? And that's kind of the same area there. You notice that exaggerated curve here in the background and all these buildings in the background. That's, again, 2019. 30 years later, this is very close to where that was because this building and this building and this building are in the background in the previous picture, but they're hard to recognize because everything's so renovated and overgrown, it's hard to see them. Look at this building in behind here. That's part of it there, okay? Looks like it might have even been fire damage on one of them. But anyway, that gives you an idea of how things have changed. So this is from Castle Shannon heading northbound up toward Washington Junction, I believe. Actually, it's south of there, Washington Junction. This is on the library branch per se. The library branch really wasn't modernized with the single exception of Lytle Station, which now has a high platform. West Library has a high platform, but that was just put there where it already was, okay? And otherwise, they still have the low platforms and the overhead and everything else that was there when the PCCs were running until they closed as part of an emergency back in 1988. So on the library branch, for every stop, the light rail car has to use the low door. If you'll notice, they have high doors and one low door in the front. This is the only way in and out on the library branch. And that's Port Authority. That's one reason they want to go to a St. Louis kind of design as a joint, because Port Authority's long-term planning is to reduce the number of stops they have, but expand the high platform capability elsewhere on the system they have now. I think there's a grand total of something like 22 high platform stations, and they want to go for the whole system if they can. But if they do, it's going to be one at a time through decades to happen, okay? So that's your two-car trains of Lrvs on the library branch aren't very useful except for that one door rather. The second door, you can't even get on it unless you want to make a special stop for somebody, which is kind of something they really don't like to do because you can get trouble for that. Or you have to make them to go to West Library or Lytle, which are the only two high platforms they have out there, okay? But it looks great. So practically speaking, it's got a lot of shortcomings, shall we say, okay? This is how King School Road looks in 2019. The same picture would be like this in 1986. Same exact location, okay? See how humble that looked back then. It was still a single trolley. It was just basically one stop above the former interurban it used to be, okay? So like I say, basically the Pittsburgh system is nice to look at. It's a great, place to visit. If you want to take pictures like this, you have to do a lot of thinking ahead because you really have to know where you are and how the schedule is going to work. And, that otherwise you get confused and whatever. Anyway, that's the same place as Beagle. Beagle as in the dog type. Same place. The shelter there was put in 1982. Looks pretty good, actually, considering it's coming on 40 plus years old now. Anyway, so back to the map again to show you what the next section, it starts at Washington Junction here and goes down to South Hills Village. On a Saturday, they only have the blue line running. The red line basically only runs on weekdays. Like I said, I went back to a second trip in September of 2019 to get that portion. You might see that in another show if you're really, interested in that. By the way, with the caption bars, like with the blue and white, that's why it shows as blue and white. That tells you it's a blue line train. If it was a red line train, it would have a red caption. There might be some of those in here, but I'm not sure. Okay. And of course, the trolley track used to be in the middle here, this median. That's how they built that originally. Back here in the weeds is the old substation that used to be here. There was a loop around it at one point when it was PCC operation. That's long gone. The substation isn't in use anymore. Hasn't been for a long time. It's a local landmark now, but I don't think they're really noticing it. That's just like I said, it was a Saturday. The Pittsburgh Pirates were in town, and here we go for a family trip up to the ballpark. Just to, that's how the light rail is in use. Okay, on a Saturday, that's basically most of what they choose for. So as we get farther south. These were portions of the old line to Drake. It used to be a single track line that was double tracked and expanded for light rail phase 1. It opened in 1987 originally. There's a piece of it there. It was open in 86 here, but at that point it was using the Overbrook line because the Mount Lebanon portion was not yet open. So this was just on the outer line using PCC cars, okay? Basically the same place right there, okay? And of course the guy, same thing, it's all low platform at one door in the 2-car train. So this guy got off of the trolley and then he was trying to run across the road there with the trolley coming by. They made a big blast like, oh! So he stopped. So I had to wait a whole 35 minutes to get another increment to take a second picture with the same, without the guy photobombing me there, okay? That's at Highland. And basically the same virtual same look from 1986. You can notice how the facilities are starting to age. Again, you'll notice the rust over here. Sometimes the lighting doesn't work too well and things like that. In fact, and actually this is the first time here they're replacing some of the rail from the first time it was built since 1986. Okay, this was in 2019. Actually, when I took these pictures, I went back to Devon, and Devon got a hold of one of their officials out there, and they had me write up a little report of what I was seeing, because he said, you're the first guy that's been here since it opened in 1987 that was paying attention to the details like that. He said, that's only something a rail fan would notice. So I sent him a little report and said, well, here's what we found, where the shelters are falling apart, the signs are faded, the lighting may or may not work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Port Authority evidently isn't paying attention to this stuff. So lo and behold, when I went to my shop, when I went to the trip again in September of 2019, there was Port Authority with the facilities people fixing all the stuff I wrote up on the report. It was amazing, Anyway, Yeah, see the new rail here? That's brand new replacement rail. So when we got there in September, in this particular station, these lights were gone and they had a brand new set of LEDs there in their place. Okay, that's one example. The same place just when it first opened, on the way down to the shop and the car house and everything else. Bethel Village is the last stop on the old, I'm sorry, Dorchester is the last stop on the old Drake branch. Then you have the new branch over to South Hills Village. So that's an operator who is trying to hide his face. That's all that is, okay? They have some buttes there just like everywhere else, okay? That's a high school in the background there. So this is the branch off to South Hills Village. Now, the thing with South Hills Village branch per se, it's very short. But that land was bought by the Port Authority back in the 1960s, upon which it was supposed to put the old Skybus proposal, okay? So what they did is they just used the land that they bought for the Skybus, but instead of building it as a Skybus, they just made it a light rail branch. That's where they could put the shop. And that replaced the South Hills or Tunnel car house that had been there forever, okay? So anyway, that's it for day one. Actually, I'm kind of overrunning here. That's the end of the first portion. I got to go back to get the rest of them here. Some are shorter, some are longer. I'll try not to be so long for the next one. See if it opens the right way. No, it didn't. Hang on. Hold on. I got to do it by hand here. Open with this. And there we go. Okay. So the second day, on Sunday, June 2nd, we went to the Ohio Railway Museum in Columbus. Okay. There's not really a whole lot to see there. This is what I went there to see myself, was car 163. It's one of the 3 surviving airporter cars. The other 2 are at the Northern Ohio Railway Museum. None of the 3 run. This was the last one that actually did run. RTA got it going for a restoration to service in 1988. That was to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the RTA's rapid to the Cleveland airport, okay? By that time, they'd been retired for about 2 years. They got it going. It was used as a tower for a while, and then it finally died. And then they basically paid to truck it down to the Ohio Railway Museum where it still sits, okay? But at least it's there. And another picture at another time, I can show you the pictures of the ones at NORM as well. They're not probably as a good shop as 163, but that's what you got. So this is just some other examples of what they have. It's not really a whole lot. And they have a train, quote unquote, a train ride, which is what this is. It tells you on the top, tells you on the caption up top what it is. Okay, trying to get rid of that. There we go. Okay. Who built it? General Electric, 1946. It's a 45-ton. I don't know who had it originally. It doesn't tell me. This is what we used to call potato coaches, a steel, kind of sort of a semi-common standard of steel coach that railroads had in the 1930s. We used to call it a potato coach because the Bangor and Aroostook had them, Maine Central had them, and the Boston and Maine had them. That's Mike Miller himself. If you never met him, he's an ERA member. He was on our trip with us. Just me and him, basically. He's standing outside of streetcar 703, which is the only one that survives from the former Columbus streetcar operation that closed in, I believe it was 1948. And it's sitting at Ohio Railway Museum waiting to get restored like everything else. It's under tarps. So they're good enough on Sundays. They fold up the tarp so you can see what it is, okay? It's kind of the same thing with this thing. It's one of the Illinois Terminal PCC cars. There were 2 of them, 450 and 451. They were saved from scrapping back in 1964. And what happened was the museum, I'm trying to think now. They bought one here, and the other one went to Connecticut to the Warehouse Point Trolley Museum. And when the RTA wanted to experiment about running a through service from Shaker Heights to the airport, they brought the two cars to Cleveland. They rehabilitated, they redid the electrics on them, they did everything, but they never used it except for regular service on Shaker Heights because the proposal never went anywhere. Okay. So anyway, so that's basically what it looks like underneath the tarp for what it's worth. That's about all you're going to see. And the interior, you can go in and have a look. This is the streetcar they use for their excursion service. It's a former interurban car. Tells you Ohio Public Service lightweight interurban number 64. It was built by Coolman in Cleveland. Okay, it's supposed to be a single car service, but they sort of patch it together as a double ender because they don't have a loop at one end. That's the original number, and then the 64 is a ladder number that they added. Okay. And that's basically at the Ohio Railway Museum. That's pretty much all there was to see. So the next day, we'll show you. Let me show you the Dayton here. This is very short because the idea was I had a list of locations of trolley buses that I had taken at Dayton many years ago, and I wanted to take some update versions, and I never got to it. Okay, so these are from the news that I was able to. This is Dayton itself. One of the neighborhoods that has a trolleybus loop on it. You notice that the houses there are all basically squashed. That's from the May 29th tornado in Dayton, okay? Somewhat the same thing here. You notice how they have the picture there, if you can see it. Let me see if I can increase that a little. It pixelated off pretty easily, but notice they got the advertisement here for the Generac generator, ironically. And there's the background, what happens. I guess they kind of needed some generators there, huh? So anyway, and then this is it's an office building that wasn't far from where we were staying on Interstate 75. This thing, the whole side of the building was pulled off like by a can opener, okay? Thankfully, there was nobody in there because this was in the middle of the night, but there's an awful lot of folks and there was an insurance company. There's a lot of people who lost their office overnight. So who knows what happened after that? God knows with all the contracts and everything. Hopefully it was saved somewhere else because it ain't there anymore. That's kind of what you were facing with at Dayton when I got there. And we were talking about trolley buses. And when I talked to the guy there, he says, not going to be any trolley buses for a while. We have no idea. So like I said, they didn't have any trolley buses at all till August. That was only a couple. Then they really didn't get the system going again until November of 2019, finally, more or less to the way it was done regularly, okay? So throughout the pandemic in 2020, two things happened. They replaced the very last of the Skoda trolley buses. You'll see those here. Well, that's a flyer, okay? These are just some areas at Dayton that I wanted to get pictures of, but I couldn't get pictures of. I'm hoping to try again this summer if I can get there, or when I get there for the Hoosier Traction Meet, which is held in Dayton. And they're supposed to have a fan trip, but with or without the fan trip, I want to get these locations for update shots, okay? You can see the dates of the pictures is pretty old. This is what they called an ETI trolley bus. They're built by Skoda back in, as it says in the number, 1998. That was its delivery year. It's a 37.5-foot bus with a very short wheelbase, okay? It looks more like an extended minibus, really, okay? Anyway, the last of these was retired Thanksgiving 2019, and that was only the last one which had been in service for about a month after the rest of them. So when they got the dual modes, they received about 50 of them, and that's all they run now. And they use the trolleybus overhead for certain portions of certain schedules. Otherwise, they use either the trolleybuses or they run on a generator for a electric motor. Okay, they don't have a diesel engine and an electric motor. They've got an electric motor that can be powered either by the overhead or as a generator to run the wheels. Otherwise, kind of like the ones we have in Boston, they call the dual mode articulators, DMAs. Okay. Anyway, these are just, like I said, some of the places I was going to go. That's Main and Third, which is the epicenter of trolleybus operations in Dayton, as you might know if you've been there. But they have a downtown downtown terminal per se for the trolleybuses now. That opened in 2018, I believe it was. We went to the terminal. It looks great, but there weren't any trolleybuses to see. Okay. RTA is really very cooperative about this whole thing. You know, they love it. It's the only, it gives them some stature versus all the other small cities around the country. Okay. So they really like rail fans there much more than some properties do. Okay. That's what happens when it breaks down or when it broke down back then. So that's my only way I could show you of Dayton what we did, because there wasn't else to see otherwise. We stayed there several nights at the hotel, but that was about it. So going back to the next one here, next chapter, if you will. Okay, this is the Cincinnati Street Car, known as the Cincinnati Bell Connector. I can get it to the software here. There we go. All right, this is the system map here. It's very simple. It's like a double, single track, and it's kind of like a double loop. That's about it. I added up here in the upper red is the car house site, okay? My surprise when I got there is how great it's operated. It's done by a guy who now works in MTA with the Long Island Railroad. He's a native of Cincinnati, but he didn't like the politics out there. I mean, I'm telling you this. He wouldn't tell you this. I'm telling you this. He left Cincinnati because of the politics out there, okay? He did a really great job getting this thing started through a very difficult birth. And it's still there, but, you know, Cincinnati just isn't a real big on the public transit in any way, okay? And Cincinnati is very similar to Pittsburgh. Both of those cities are hemmed in by their topography because there's so much hilly land around there. It's very difficult to expand or rebuild, you know, certainly cheaply without, you know, taking down a whole hill someplace. So it hasn't really been an area that'll grow for urban transit, unfortunately, okay? Anyway, what we're going to do with this bunch of pictures here, our tour starts here at 2nd Street. The ballpark is right down here, Great American, and the, what is it, Brown Stadium, I think, where the Bengals are. That's right here. Riverfront Stadium used to be right there. And it's going to go up Main Street here through downtown, and then over to here to this crossing here. And then what I do is for this section, I go back down here toward downtown. It went for 3 different sections, but I got the whole thing with digital images for the whole 3 days. So anyway, that's looking north on Walnut Street at 2nd. That's an interstate highway it's crossing over. It's going to make a hard turn around the left right there on 2nd Street or to 2nd Street. CBC, by the way, is Cincinnati Bell Connector. CAF is the building. Urbos 3 is the CAF model of car. It's exactly the same as the cars they have in Kansas City. They were both opened at about the same time. They can completely interchange parts. Unfortunately, they cannot jointly manage the fleets, okay? Kansas City is much better run, to be frank. Cincinnati, with all its problems, they try to cut short on the budget. They try to basically do a lot of shortcuts. And one of the first things that happened in Cincinnati, of course, is 2 of these cars got croaked in automobile accidents, okay? So you'll see the same 3 cars every time I was there because those are the only 3 that run. Are 1175, 1177, and 1179. You'll see a picture of 1176 in the shop because that's still waiting to have things put back together to go back into service after body repair. 1178 has other problems. That's not in service as well, okay? The numbers 1175 to 1179 were patterned after the very last PCC cars that Cincinnati Street Railway had that got sold to, there was a group, I think it was 1150 to 1174 was their numbers. They were sold to the Toronto Transit Commission in 1950, and they got converted to what they called an A9 4500 series PCC cars in Toronto. Okay, they ran there till 1982. And actually, the Cincinnati Transit Historic Association just had a big deal last week because they're celebrating, if you want to call that a celebration, in the Cincinnati area, they're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the abandonment of streetcars in Cincinnati, which I believe was on June of 1951. The PCCs were basically already gone by that time. So anyway, that's just turning onto Main Street. That's the former, I think that's the Procter and Gamble headquarter building at one time. Of course, now it's just the PNC Tower. Procter and Gamble's in a modern building, but I think they might not even be in Cincinnati anymore. I'm not sure now. They were in the early 2000s when they used to be there. Anyway, it's heading up Main Street, going north. At a bar that was down at the turnback there across from the ballpark, we found this set of seats that were preserved. They say, I wouldn't argue with it, that they were saved from the old Crosley Field that was closed in 1970, I believe. It's the old ballpark for the Cincinnati Reds, okay? That was on one side of the door. And then on the other side of the door was a set of seats from the old Riverfront Stadium, which was at the same site. Crosley Field wasn't near here. Crosley Field was a little bit north into the city, and that actually was right next to the right-of-way that went into Cincinnati Union Terminal by the railroads. And that current site is where the bus garage is for the Southern Ohio Regional Transit Authority. So anyway, just going down Main Street in downtown Cincinnati, such as it is. I did try to interact some photos here that I had on file, actually starting here. If you'll notice this overpass, that's been there for quite a while. That was there, first time I was there was 1987 when light rail wasn't even a thought, okay? So I got a few pictures here and there of buses. And this is the same place. If you notice, the overpass was behind it back then. That's, what, 30 plus years before the previous picture. Okay. Same place. That's a AM General bus, if you remember the AM General bus. Going north. Cincinnati's not a bad city. It's small. For what you consider to be a big city, it's pretty small. And like I say, it's hemmed in by its topography, its geography. So that's why you don't see, a major reason why you don't see a lot of urban transit there. And that's, again, one reason why Dayton is more, what would you call it? It's more pronounced than Cincinnati is for transit public because of the trackless trolleys now. Yeah, you notice the numbering here. It's newer numbers because this one had damage. It was already replaced. Pretty simple otherwise. Oh, sorry. Skip that one. Not as much to see. So at Main and 12th, it turns left onto 12th. And then it heads west about 4 blocks to the west. It's this turn here is where you're at. And you'll go down 12th Street to that crossing there. Okay. It's certainly a nice looking city. There's a lot of old buildings that are very well preserved there. The area where this goes is called the Over the Rhine. That's a northern neighborhood in the old city of Cincinnati, but it's been kind of in decline for decades. And that was one reason they built this, because they thought the streetcar might help to renew it. And it really started to until the coronavirus sort of cut it short, okay? I believe this was actually closed during the pandemic last year for about 3 months, and then they decided to reopen it. It's not part of the RTA, but it's going to become part of the RTA. And it's kind of a political football. Like I said, Mr. Grether left this kind of suddenly back in 2019, and that was why. Okay? But I guess that had been building for years before that. So this is coming down on Race Street at 12th Street, where the line, if you want to put it this way, the line crosses itself, okay? So these are heading south on Race Street. And it goes to Central Parkway, and then it'll make a left. It was impossible to get a car-free shot here. So I got bombed. It must have been about 7 or 8 times. I just give you the best ones I could get, okay? That's it. Because there was no, I mean, there was always a car coming straight. There was just no way to do away with that. Oh, well, you can't win everything, right? And then this is making the right turn to head on Walnut back down to 2nd Street toward the ballpark at this point. That building in the background is this thing here is a huge school. It's an elementary school. It's probably one of the biggest in the country. Okay. So you're at this turn right here. And then we're just going to go down to about here where it says CAC. And that's the end of that section. Okay. There's that school in the background. It was built in 1904, and it's nicely restored. Of course, it's all run by the Cincinnati Department of Education or whatever their school department is. It's all city stuff, okay? A city endeavor. Cincinnatians tend to be very proud of their history. They try to preserve as much as they can, though there's a lot of things that haven't been preserved, and there's a lot of reasons for that too, okay? When you see the sign, it says OTR, that's over the Rhine. That's what it stands for. The other one that you partly see is called the Banks. The Banks is the other end down at the stadium. See the Banks? So anyway, that was that was section 1. And then this was an overlook for the John Roebling suspension bridge. Same designer of the Brooklyn Bridge, and this was done well before that. I think this was erected in 1871, I believe it was, okay? Anyway, this is no longer used by traffic. It's strictly for bicycles and pedestrians, okay? And where I'm taking the picture used to be an approach of what was called the Dixie Terminal when I was there in the 1980s. That's been torn down. And they're in the process now of just starting another big redevelopment for the riverfront. So we got to it just in time, because this is part of a building that now would be right in the way. You wouldn't be able to see this. So we probably got it one of the last weeks you could do this before they start erecting the steel here, okay? But that was your best outlook for the afternoons anyway. That was your best view of the bridge. So I put in some old pictures I had of the Roebling Bridge back in 1990. This is tank or transit area of northern Kentucky. And that used to be the old Covington and Newport, I think it was called back in the old days, okay? Anyway, it used the Roebling Bridge to get from Covington, Kentucky to Cincinnati, and then behind them on into the Dixie Terminal, okay, which is just a enclosed loop terminal. It had restaurants, it had stores, and basically you'd go to your berth and get on the bus and go back to Covington. They didn't run on the streets in Cincinnati at all from here, okay? So you can see the faded sign there saying the Dixie Terminal. That whole building was gone when I was there in 2019. It was just a hole in the ground at that point. But that's what it used to look like, okay? So then, oh, wait a minute, that's going back. I'll get back to that again. Hold on. That's it for that day. Okay, so the next day is the Wednesday. Okay, and I went to the, as I was saying, to the museum. We'll show you that. There's a little bit of a history with that. I think we sort of went through it before. So this is the H&M equipment as it was in the day. I forget, it says, okay, Class C. So that would have been built in 1910. Okay. This would have been added for the 6th Avenue line when it opened. That was the 3rd section of the H&M to open an original. And behind them here, you see 341. I believe that's, that's the C class there. This is an F class. So you notice how they have the 2 different fronts, okay? They have the more compressed front of the car, the vestibule on the 300 series, and the modern vestibule of the 400 series. This one has got the body like 503 at Brantford, same body. The reason they did that is because the vestibules were so crowded, the guards could not safely open or close the doors because they used to stand right here and look through the train. This is where the door controls were, right here, okay? So they used to stand in the end there and look through the car to close the doors, and they couldn't see safely, so they had to enlarge the vestibules. That's the difference between 256, which you'll see looks like this, and 503, which you'll see looks like this, okay? And they're the only 2 cars that are left. So this is 256 as it looked in St. Louis when I got there, Kirkwood, Missouri, June the 4th, 2019. Okay, just basically for the record, if nothing else. You notice there's no beams, no shoes, no nothing on it. Like I said, the motors are gone. The controller is still there, but I don't know how much of it is left inside. Brantford itself has parts from other path cars they scrapped years ago in lieu and in case they ever were able to get this car. They've been talking about it now really for over 40 years, okay? And they'd like to join this one, 503, which, as I said, Alan Zalazzo has been working on this since 79, and it's almost restored now. In fact, that's Alan himself right there, if you know Alan, otherwise known as Subway Al, we call him, okay? He was a motorman for Path from, I think he started in 1976, and he finally retired, I believe, in 2016, okay? He was a big rail fan, even on the job. He used to wear half the time, well, I say that euphemistically, not literally, but half the time you'd see him, he'd be wearing a real TTC uniform on the job at Path. Stuff like that, okay? He's a nice guy, he really is. That's his wife, I can't remember her name now. Dolores, that's Dolores Salazzo right there. So that's what it looked like in 2018. And it's still basically, you know, it's 99% finished. Runs great. So again, this would be the sister car if they could ever get it to Connecticut, okay? That's the curator of NMOT right here. He's in favor of moving the car to Connecticut. A lot of their board members are not, and we can't get a line on them whether they intend to restore it themselves or what. They don't seem to know what they want to do, okay? So basically, it's kind of on hold. And this is just the stuff that's around it. This is one of them is the original P5. Yeah. The only surviving P5, I believe. I know when they were talking about moving this, the Pennsylvania Railroad Technical and Historical Society also had been talking about getting this moved to the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum there. But so far, no dice. So anyway. So that's why we drove 1,500 miles just to take pictures of this, what you'd call otherwise a ratty old subway car, okay? But, you know, you are allowed to dream. We'll see if it ever works out, okay? And at least we know what kind of shape it's in and what it looks like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So some other stuff they had there is an ex-St. Louis Public Service PCC. Of course, these were sold off to other properties in the 1950s. And, well, I guess by the time we would have known that left, they were gone in the 1950s, okay? So this particular car went to San Francisco Municipal Railway, where it operated for a number of years as car 1155. And they bought it back and they restored it to its original identity rather. Now, the NMOT is standard gauge streetcars. St. Louis streetcars are wide gauge, so these are not the original trucks. They also have to use all steel wheels because most of the operation there is railroad, so they need railroad tread, not traction tread. Okay, that's why you got the beefy trucks underneath it. In fact, they run the CTA cars there on their own cars, and they can barely do that under code. Okay, this is a Philadelphia car, 2740. I would have seen that in SEPTA many times after it was rebuilt. So it's been sort of unrebuilt with the modernized windows, etc. And it's sort of spoofing a PTC version of itself. Okay, so it's supposed to look like it would have about 1959. It tries. They've now got it marked. I think it's in service now and then. You'll notice this also has steel very much unlike a Philadelphia PCC. It has steel wheels underneath. Okay, I think those are CTA trucks. Okay, but anyway, it's got the PTC logo, etc. And of course, it's got the modern windshield, and again, the modern sash. Al Weber, who's the president currently of the NRHS, is the guy that did most of the work on this. He was kind of shy about me taking a picture of it because he didn't think it was going to be a very good picture. I said, it looks great. I don't know what you're complaining about, you know. Anyway, you know, he said they have an original set of sash for the roll-up sash on the side, but I don't know if he's ever going to put it in. Okay. There's a lot of hope there at NMOT, but I don't know they have a lot of execution. Okay. Now, one of the other barns we went to, NMOT provided two 6000 series elevated cars from Chicago that they had been in storage here from, I think it was the spring of 1994 until 2017. I forget when it was, 16 or 17. Maybe it was 17. What happened was they were supposed to be used as parts for the car 44, which is a single car, okay? And anyway, I think you might see 44 again when you're coming around. Anyway, that was stored in this barn for over 20 years. It was never in the weather. It looked great. It looked like to the day it was painted at Skokie Shops back in 1990. The CTA people went down there and had a look, and they loved it. And they said, we got to have this back because we need a set of 6000s for our museum fleet. By the way, if you want to call them that, the assistant curator of the CTA historic fleet really is none than Bill Wall of Shoreline Trolley Museum up here in Connecticut. Okay, so Bill and the CTA put their heads together and they worked with NMOT, and they brought a truck down there, a contractor, and he brought them back to Skokie Shops. So 6711 and 6712, which were here, are now at CTA. They've been put back in revenue service, if you will, for special service and stuff like that. Went back on the road, I think, in the end of 2018. And it's in great shape. They had to do a lot of mechanical restoration because a lot of the parts that it was supposed to have been taken for 44, of course, were gone. A couple of the seats were missing. Some of the doors were a little messed up, but they were able to fix it back and whatever. Anyway, so in that barn in 2019, by the time I was there, we found this in there. It's a restored St. Louis Public Service streetcar that was completely restored to look as it had in 1904, okay, for a special event. It took a lot of money and a lot of effort to restore it. It was great. The only trouble is it's got St. Louis streetcar gauge trucks. So it can't run on their museum operation because it's got wide gauge trucks. And there it sits, okay? And the public can't see it by itself, okay? This is some other stuff they had hidden there that the public generally don't see. This is an interurban from Purdue University. In fact, it tells you on the top exactly what it was, the old Louisiana. It was a high-speed experimental car from back in the day. These are some Illinois Terminal, I think it's two of them, Illinois Terminal heavyweights. Well, it says lightweights there. I'd call them heavyweights compared to the PCCs. Okay. But that's basically the ones that ran with the PCC cars. And this thing was a, let's see, this is the one they wanted. It's got a single trucker. Had a lot of debris, had more debris in front of it. They tried to move it out of the way. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, I'm getting a message at the top there. Not sure what it means. Anyway, so this truck here, evidently, the Brantford people are interested in it. I don't know that the body's going to mean much. It's probably too far gone by now. There's a different one. This thing is it's not a Forney. It's, well, it is a Forney. It's a different type of Forney. It's a Vauquelin, I think it was called in the time. Number 9, it was known as the Charles H when it was built. This was built in Providence, Rhode Island for the Lake Street Elevated Railroad back in 1893. And it was used for the first 3 years of operation before they electrified the Lake Street Elevated. Okay. It was saved, and I think it was resold to one of the sugarcane farms down in Cuba. And then they brought it back eventually. I'm not sure who brought it back, but somebody did many years ago, probably back in the 1950s. And there it sits. So when they had their 100th anniversary back in 1993 or 1992, CTA brought this locomotive back to Chicago and put it on display with their own car number 1, which is forever interred in the Museum of, what is it, the Museum of Technology or whatever in Chicago there, near the University of Chicago. So believe it or not, this was the only surviving elevated railway steam locomotive in North America. And if you want to picture what it was running in Manhattan before 1902, this was basically the same thing, which shows you how small the scale is versus what you see for modern day rapid transit, even the IRT size ones. I mean, that was tiny stuff, okay? And very slow too. There's 44 there. That's the one that they do operate now and then. It's still got some little problems here and there, but at least it can run. And that's it for the museum. So that was basically the main version, the main idea for the trip. So we're going back to the, whoops, I don't know what happened with that. Hold on, let me close that. Don't need anything for Edge, that's for sure. So the next day was very short because I had a show to make with the St. Louis NRHS. I can't even remember what the show was. It was probably the same thing that you guys saw another year, okay? I think it was the one about the B&O. I had to literally bring the show with me in my laptop to St. Louis at the time, okay? So the day of the meeting was on Wednesday. I had the time that day, and I said, look, at the time I was here in 2005 last, I couldn't make it down to the bridge down here in Thieves because I had heavy thunderstorms and I couldn't get any light. So I drove all the way, it was like 160 miles from St. Louis down I-55 to Thieves just to get a few pictures that I couldn't get in 2005 in places here and there. So anyway, when I got down there that spring, if you remember the spring of 2019, the Mississippi River had a big flooding problem all through area St. Louis southward. It started with Minnesota and came all the way down the river the whole way, okay? So this is actually in Thebes, Illinois. That's coming out of the, across the bridge from Mississippi. And before that, not too far, it came out of Arkansas, believe it or not. It's a busy route from the Union Pacific. It's its main route from Dallas, Fort Worth up to St. Louis, okay? So this is the bridge itself with the train on it. It's probably the best picture I was going to get. But you notice how flooded the baseball field is here, okay? This is about, at the time I was there, it was about 22 feet above flood stage. That's what it looks like. And that's taken about a quarter of a mile away from where the river would normally be, which would have been way over here somewhere, okay? So that's life in the St. Louis area sometimes. So I just waited way up river here and the same train came by just to show it closer what it looked like. And I got, like I said, shots here and there. This is sort of semi-flooded here. Everywhere that was, when it rained heavy, the railroad had to close, okay? It would take about a half a day to drain out so they could reopen again. And then, of course, you got to do the signal inspections and all that kind of stuff to make sure there's no damage. So it was a mess, okay? That's an empty coal train there coming by. There's more flooding here. Normally in the background, this would be corn, fields of corn. Look at it there. It's all, I don't know how high the river is there, okay? And there's a stack train coming up from Texas going to St. Louis. And that was all I got for the day. It was 5 whole train pictures that day. And then I had to take the long drive back to St. Louis to do the show. They weren't too thrilled about that, okay? So the next day, something else that shouldn't be there, okay? Let's see. The next day was Thursday. We did St. Louis itself. The Metrolink I had been to several times, and it hadn't changed at all from the last time I visited in 2007. So I didn't really bother with more pictures of, I got them in film, so I got to scan them to get them on Flickr. I'm planning to eventually. Well, after we were there in June of 2019, St. Louis Metrolink began rebranding its vehicles. So what you're going to see are the pictures of the Lrvs as Mike Miller took them in 2019, which looks exactly the same as they did when I was there in 2007. Okay. If you've never seen the St. Louis Metrolink, this is the place I was telling you. They want to make a joint acquisition with Pittsburgh for new vehicles. But anyway, the original line went from East Riverfront here, and it went up toward the airport, okay? That's first section. Second section was 2 extensions on the Illinois portion. You notice the river here in the middle. So this is Illinois, that's Missouri, and there was 2 extensions over here. First to Fairview Heights, then eventually to Scott Air Force Base, called Shiloh Scott, okay? Then the third extension was the line, the branch here to Shrewsbury. We parked that day at Shrewsbury, and I just kind of wandered around. I took a ride on the whole system more than anything. Took the whole day just to take a ride. It's pretty big. So these are the oldest cars they have, the 1000s. They were built in delivered in 1993. They're identical to the Pittsburgh cars that you saw, the 4200 series, except if you notice, instead of the headlights being up here in the middle, they're down here, okay? And they have the extra door I was telling you about right here. That's it. So when they have a new design, the only thing if they want to, they can omit that door and they'd have the same cars they have in St. Louis. That's why they're talking about a joint acquisition there, okay? So they have 4 series, LRV 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is an LRV 4. These are the same kind of car, except instead of being built in Germany like the originals were, these were built in Sacramento, California by Siemens many years later. They were delivered in 2005. That's the newest ones they have. And they're probably about 20 to 25 per fleet over 4 series, okay? So it's close to 100 cars altogether. I don't know how they're doing since the pandemic. Much like Pittsburgh, their ridership is heavier than Pittsburgh, which isn't hard, but it's, not a major transit system. So it could be they're running single units themselves. I really don't know, okay? And like I told you, Mike took these sort of on the fly, so it just gives you some glimpse of what the system looks like. That's the tunnel downtown through St. Louis. That was originally used by several railroads, actually, because it came out of the Eads Bridge across the Mississippi River, and eventually it made its way to St. Louis Union Station. The railroad stopped using that, I want to say, as early as the early 80s, and that's when it was converted to Metrolink after that, okay? The tunnel itself, I believe, was originally constructed in the 1860s. It kind of looks like it because it's got brick lining in there, okay? Sort of like this. It's a very ancient construction. That's on the base of the Eads Bridge looking toward Illinois, okay? So the light rail uses the lower level of the Eads Bridge. I don't think there's any vehicles on the top of the Eads Bridge anymore. I think it's just for for the one in Cincinnati. It's just pedestrian use and maybe bicycles and stuff like that. So this picture here, Laclade's Landing, that's probably your most, how would you put it? Your most photogenic location on the system, I would say. And historic for setting, okay? This was a body of a former Omaha Bernie car that we found in a spaghetti factory restaurant in downtown St. Louis, right next to the river, okay? It's all original construction around it, too. This was put up, pardon me, I think they told us in the 1850s this building had been put up. It looked it. So they kind of wedged it in there in the basement of the restaurant. Great place to eat your pasta if you could, you know. There's Laclade's Landing again. It's in a park, actually. And then he just took one picture on the Illinois side at Riverfront, East Riverfront. That's right off the end of the Laclade's, I'm sorry, the Eads Bridge. And a couple of local Metrolink cops there. And that was it for that. Hold on a second. We go back to the next chapter here. Like I said, a lot of these are pretty short. So the next day was on Thursday. And what we did, we had a private tour of the, such as it is, of the loop trolley, as they called it. It was running 2 cars when they could. There weren't enough trips to actually photograph the things per se. We had to go by car and chase the trolley from point to point to try to get enough pictures, and it still didn't have enough, okay? And the thing was suspended in December of 2019, finally, and it's still not reopened, and we're not sure if it ever will, okay? But anyway, it shows you a map of what it is. It goes from the Missouri State Museum. It crosses the Metrolink here, okay? Which actually the Metrolink kind of goes like this. So it crosses it twice. Goes on de Bolivier, which is a famous streetcar line. And Delmar was also a streetcar line. The Villater Garage is the old car house for St. Louis Public Service, okay? The loop trolley is not part of the Metrolink. It's a separate operation, somewhat like the Cincinnati Bell streetcar. And it really hasn't done anything yet except spend money. I think if they're lucky, they might have gotten $100 in revenue over their first few months of operation, and that was it. Okay. These 2 cars that were in use are formerly from the replicas of Council Crust from Portland, Oregon. They were rebuilt by a contractor. Okay. They probably go a total of about 12 miles an hour. They have Metrolink operations that they sort of stand there and tell them how to run it. And of course, they really don't know how to do it. And they're manual control. So they usually have a habit of controlling, holding the notches too long. And they love to burn out the controllers and this stuff, okay? But anyway, they keep trying. It's there. So that's at the museum end. There's the 2 cars are 001 and 002. That's the only 2 Council Crest cars they got. They acquired 3 others from Seattle that used to be on the waterfront streetcar. Those are from Australia. You'll see them eventually, okay? So the tour we got was on the line, if you will. Now, again, there'd be 1 car running every hour. So we kind of had to chase it along. And every once in a while, they'd slow down to try us get a picture of them. And, you know, it was kind of scattershot. the results were so-so, shall we say. Okay? I'd love to be able to get back and try it again, but they're still not running. So anyway, that's why you see the same car over and over again, going both ways. And that was when the St. Louis Blues were making their run to the Stanley Cup. That's why the banners are, that was a big deal. It was actually during the Stanley Cup finals when this was done. So we got a tour to the shop. There's a guy named Grider who ran it. He's been out of work for most of the next year and a half. Not kidding, early 2020. These are the next car was, I forget what city it's from in Australia there. Somebody else would know, I'm sure. It's common, okay? But it was sent to Seattle back in the 1980s and reconfigured for Seattle. So they sort of restored it to its original configuration through a contractor, and that's how Loop wants to use it. It still wasn't ready for service. It's $750,000 just to do this car itself. They're not even talking about the other two. They're in the barn, okay? If you see in the background on the left-hand side over here, this is one of the two Seattle cars here. Just the interior, full of test equipment and everything else. Why there was so much trouble, I don't know. So that's just a look at what it would have looked like back in 1988 when I saw it. Okay, Seattle, of course, is completely different now from what it did in 1988. Nothing you see here is there now, including the streetcar. Believe it or not, this single track here in the right, with all the trash all over the place, that was the main line track for the then the Burlington Northern between Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia, which of course now has got Amtrak on it, or it had it anyway. That was the Talgo's trains and everything else that went up for the Cascades. I don't think they're running to Vancouver, or have been since the pandemic started. And the highway, of course, was demolished. It was part of a park. And now most of what you see where the highway was is now high-rise condos, okay? Seattle's totally different now. Anyway, like I said, that's what they were waiting to do someday. Melbourne, Australia. There you go. That's the city. That's the other one there. Actually, I went to Melbourne Tramways. I got a hold of them. They were very cooperative, and they gave me the whole records of when these were built, what happened to them, when they were retired, what replaced them. Turns out they were built in 1928, and they were retired by Modern Cars in 1999 over there. These were sold to Seattle in, I think it was 1985 originally. So these are your Council Crest cars again. That's one of the ticket vending machines there in the way. Best angle you can get, you know. And this little car here, that's a guy named Andy Sisk, who's a prominent rail fan in Greater St. Louis. And that's his car. If you notice, he's got it painted like St. Louis Public Service colors. Okay, kind of cute. That's just that's the Wabash station at Delmar, just the building. The trolley goes by here, doesn't do anything with it per se. Not a great neighborhood, to be honest with you. So this is further west on Delmar, almost at the end of the line there. And that's the terminal right there. Okay, and that's the end of that. The next chapter. Okay, let's see. Looks like we got a short segment here for the St. Louis Metrolink before we left to go back to Cincinnati. There's your map again. The only thing I'm showing you here is this thing called Cortex, which was an infill station that had opened a few weeks before we were there in early 2019. Okay, and you know, to get pictures there, I got a hassle from the security guy here, oh, you can't come in here because you didn't pay a fare, because it's proof of payment there. So you can't just come in and take pictures and leave again. You got to pay a fare to get in here. He wasn't worried about me taking the pictures. He was worried about the fare. And, you know, because he was being so recalcitrant, I just said, look, I'm just going to stand over here. He says, fine. So we stood outside, but you get the idea. That's the Cortex station. Cortex is a former industrial area in the urban wasteland of St. Louis, if you will. It's first new wave redevelopment. The former industrial buildings are being converted, torn down and replaced, or being converted to condominiums or startups. There's a lot of software development here. It's a new thing they're trying to get going there. And I don't know how well it's working now. But anyway, so that's just the new platform, such as it's, you know, worth. There's your portrait of Cortex Station, if you will. Okay. There's also one of the newest cars they have with a fairly fresh paint job as well. Like I said, they're all compatible. So you have 1000s, 2000s, 3000s, 4000s. The only difference is the LRV1, which is the 1000s, have DC motors, and those are monomotors, I believe, meaning one motor per truck. The 2000, 3000, 4000s have AC motors. I think they have 2 motors per truck, I think, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway, I know the other ones are AC. And like I said, they're old enough to consider replacement now. So the next chapter is Friday. And let's see. I'm sorry. No, that was Friday morning. This is Friday afternoon. We went back to Cincinnati. Like I told you, we took a trip on Interstate 64 out of St. Louis to go through Kentucky. It rained like heck. It was like the Elvis Presley song about the falling of the cold Kentucky rain. Remember that one from 1970? So anyway, it looked like that. We drove through Kentucky, through Louisville and everything else. He thought it was great. He thought it was great. He said, it's just like the song. He said, it must always rain here. Anyway, we started this particular day. We went back to this crossover here. And this time I went up here. And we went back down to this portion here, okay? That was on Friday, I believe. Yes. No, Thursday afternoon. So this is on Central Parkway again at Vine. It's sort of a fill-in local of the last session there. That's the Kroger headquarters for the country there. You know, Kroger, the big grocery chain there. Like Stop and Shop, you know. Bigger than that, though. A lot bigger. There's one of the new modern buildings in downtown Cincinnati there. There's a few. So this was going to come west on 12th Street to turn north on Elm. I think it's Washington Park, if I'm not mistaken, just like Manhattan. That's the park there in the background. Of course, in those days, there was no masks. Park was wide open, you know. As I look at these pictures now, people like that, I want to yell at the picture, hey, get your mask on, you know. We've gotten used to that, unfortunately. That's the big music hall in the background here on the right. Architecturally, it's very famous, okay? And as you head north, you see some of the, how should we put it, the tough-looking building stock. This is what's been redeveloped by the streetcar for the over the Rhine neighborhood. Oh, you see in the background, this is boarded up. It's probably like that for decades by now, okay? So all these places were sold, all to be redeveloped. It was getting underway in 2019. It was a boon for the streetcar, which isn't doing terribly like some of them are. It could be doing better, but it needs more time to develop, okay? Like I told you, the politics in Cincinnati has a lot to do with that as well, okay? That's the Findlay Market. It's sort of a landmark in the area. This is to signify the renewal of the neighborhood that's going on, okay? Kind of like their version of Quincy Center as we have in Boston. Name the city and you have a market there. That's the Cincinnati version, okay? Of course, it isn't open yet when I'm taking the pictures here. On a Sunday, it's crowd, or at least it was in 2019. On a Sunday, it was crazy in there, okay? That's a standard Cincinnati bus, Southern Ohio Regional Transit Authority, sorta. Formerly known as the Queen City Metro, way back known as the Cincinnati Street Railway Company. So that's coming up, that's the top of Vine Street, looking north. I'm sorry, top of Elm Street, not Vine. Okay. So it's going to come and make a right-hand turn next to you there. This is an alleyway. It's actually a semi-public street. They try not people to use. And what it does, it connects to the car house, which is to the right. That's why these cars are parked here. That's for the streetcar, the car barn. Okay. So it's kind of like an alleyway going away from you there. So right now you're up here. Okay. And there's your car house. So when you look to the right, okay, you're looking, that's looking east. When you stand here at this steel mast here and you turn around, this is what you see, okay? Now the thing with this place, it's well designed. It fits into the land they had. It's in the middle of a major city. I think it's right now the only streetcar facility in the country that's basically right in the city of a major city, okay? Anyway, the point is it's compact because it's as much vertical as horizontal. In other words, it's got 2 stories and most of the repair work is done on the roof because they're low floor cars, okay? So for the MBTA people, I did a little show after this in the summer of 2019. So I marked the different facilities, the different features, so they would know what they were looking at. Okay, you can't take that for between you and me with the MBTA. You can't take that for granted. They may not know what they're looking at. This is a teacher's moment. Okay. So anyway, the reason this was so important, at least I was trying to make it important, is because this is an example, an extra, how would you put it? An exact example of what you would build if you were going to put a new streetcar facility at Mattapan for the Mattapan-Ashmont high speed, okay? This is basically what you have to build there. It's the right size, the right facilities, everything's there to maintain an LRV down at the Mattapan-Ashmont line someday, okay? It got some guffawing from the MBTA types that were looking at it like, yeah, somebody's thinking ahead. At least somebody's thinking ahead around here. You know, that was the answer, okay? They weren't really putting it down. They just know there's not a lot of priority for this thing right now. But basically, this is how you do this, what it would look like, what it would do, blah, 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 blah. You know, it was all there, okay? So that's why it's so detailed here. That's, believe it or not, on the second floor of the facility, looking at the roof of the trolley, and there's your streetcar. Well, what you do is, of course, you open up all those boxes, and then you can fix what you got to fix or renew it or clean it or inspect it or whatever. I mean, it's got everything there, okay? So that was their car house. So we go back downtown. We're going to go east on Central Parkway back to Walnut and take that going south. Well, actually, that's back to where we were. Hold on. We're going to go back to the next chapter here. Part 3, if you will. This is on Sunday, finally. Okay. This was on Sunday morning, the third portion. So this is coming out of the car houses to your left here. You're coming around the turn onto Race Street. Okay, this is the car house, the office, the operator's lobby, everything. Like I said, that's probably the best car house I've seen in North America for what you need for this kind of an operation. I give them, you know, A+++ on this design here. Okay. So this is on the other side of the Findlay Market. And as you notice, there's a ball game that day. There's one of your buildings that's up for redevelopment. This will be torn down. They'll put high condos there when it comes in. Whenever that is, it's probably still not done. Nicely restored church here, but it's no longer a church, it's a restaurant. And a highbrow restaurant, if that. Okay. So this is back downtown on Walnut. To close the circle now, we've only got about 5 blocks down here to 2nd Street. Like I say, it's a Saturday, so it's not the busiest day of the world. The weather was kind of showery by the afternoon, but that finished it up. We went to Government Square is the bus terminal for sorta. There's some buses that load on the street here, and there's others in a sort of a bus island, but there were no buses when we were there. Nothing showed up. We were there in the middle of the timing. They only run once an hour on Saturday. And it's usually pulse scheduling, so everything comes at the same time. And we fortunately didn't have the time. But I had been here before, and I took some old bus pictures here. Well, I don't know if you even see them on this, but I do have old bus pictures just to show you what it looked like, okay? And that's not the same overpass they had on Main Street on those other buildings. That's a newer one that was added in the 1990s. They have this thing in Cincinnati in downtown called Skywalk, which connects buildings without having to go on the street. Not because in Montreal, like they do that with underground passages, because in Montreal, you have the harsh winter weather. So you try not to go outside, you'll stay inside in the buildings, okay? The Cincinnati, it's not because the weather's so cold, it's because in the summer, it's so baking hot. They try to keep an air conditioning passage from building to building. And it's very humid there. That's basically what the problem is. Okay? So coming down toward the foot of Walnut Street, when you turn around, you look down the hill, and that was where all the pictures start, was down here, across the highway and so forth. And that's our look at the Cincinnati Bell Connector. So the very last chapter is Railway to Yesterday's Trolley Museum. This was on Sunday, which I think was June the 9th, on our way back home. What I did is I picked Mike up at Morristown. He lives on Broadway near 66th. So he went down to Penn Station and took New Jersey Transit over to Morristown. I picked him up there. And then I drove him back. And depending on the traffic, in 2018, I dropped him at George Washington Bridge, which turned out to be a bad move. So this time I just took him back to Morristown and it worked fine. So on the way to Morristown, this is what we saw on the way. I don't know if you've been this was my first time at this museum. Okay. That's the thing I was interested with 311, when I was of particular interest. 311 from Johnstown Traction was originally built for the Bangor Railway and Electric Company in Maine. And it didn't get sold to Johnstown, I think, till 1940. So the car's been completely restored. okay? Completely restored. And that's one of their standard Johnstown streetcars. Branford has the same thing. Seashore has one. They're all over the, well, I don't say all over the place. For trolley museums, there's several of them around. That's also restored, okay? I guess the day we were there was Johnstown Day. That was the idea. And that's, I can't remember his name, of course. Guy's there, volunteer that does all the tours and everything. A great guy. Wish I knew him better, okay? He's plugged into the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum rail fan, the boss people there, okay? I think he's the one that keeps this trolley museum going, frankly. And what I did is I went through my files and checked to see if I could find pictures of these cars that I had seen them when they were in revenue service, okay? Of course, this is, you know, back in my age in the 80s and 90s. 205 was one of the last three bullets that operated until 1990, I believe. Hasn't been touched a bit. It's still, they fixed it up. It runs fine now, you know. But I don't think it would be able to pass the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission inspection these days, okay? Like when it was in revenue service here. This was taken November 1988, if you notice. And this is what 2740 is what aspired to look like when it's finished. Well, you notice here, it's got a few different changes. It's got the modernized windows here and the modernized windows here, but it's also got an original headlight. The 2750 has a sealed beam headlight. This is one of the old Golden Globe, and they also added wings, which the GOH cars often did not have, okay? So this is supposed to look like 1959, and basically it does, but again, you've got the GOH windows here, okay? So, you know, that's what it looked like in revenue service, okay? Back in 1986. Look at the price of gas here in 1986. 90 cents a gallon. Imagine that. So anyway, that's a ride on 311. They must have had about half a dozen trips between the two streetcars all day. Then this guy, the volunteer there, and me and somebody else, we asked him to go to the other car barn to see what was in there. So he says, sure. So he kicked us off the streetcar here in the middle of the grass and into the storage barn we go, okay? So this is like a special tour here. That's a York, Pennsylvania curbside car. That's like San Diego U2 from Duvag in 1982, actually. Ex-Newark City, number 6. If you remember, NJT paid good dough, basically, to try to restore this thing to look as it did prior to I think they said it was 1975 is when they started to change the things. So they put the original doors back on it and everything else, and its original paint job. It's got some body problems now, which is one reason they don't use it as much as they used to, okay? Needs a good bit of work. The electrical stuff underneath is really needs to be replaced. That was a problem when these cars went to San Francisco. They first put them in service and all they did was body work, and they looked great. Trouble was all the wiring inside was all burnt up, so they wouldn't work right. So then they had to spend another $2 million to send them all back to Brookville to rewire them and redo the electricals under them, at which point they were changed from their General Electric propulsion that they were built with for Twin Cities back in 1947, and they got replaced to Westinghouse, the Westinghouse drum type control. This still has its original control system from Twin Cities, okay? And there's 162, that's a Stafford. And like I said, I tried to get some pictures of how they looked when they were in service. So that's 162 back in the day at 69th Street. Remember the car well. It was the very last Stafford car to run. It was sort of reluctantly retired in March of 1990. Okay, there's a bridge car 1009. Now I couldn't get a picture of that because when I was taking pictures of the bridge cars, you couldn't see the numbers very often. 109, that's the ex-San Diego car. There's at least two that I know that are externally preserved. One is here. That's one of the second order from 1982. One of the first order cars is at Orange Empire in California. And San Diego Transit itself, MTS, whatever you want to call it these days, they retained car 1001, which was the original U2 car. That's part of their historic fleet now, and it's still in revenue service each day in downtown San Diego. Okay. So anyway, a couple of looks of that. And that's how it looked when it was in passenger service back in 1985, right downtown in San Diego. Okay. There's your Liberty liner. Of course, there's two of these that existed ever, and they're both preserved. This one's in Pennsylvania, kept as a Liberty liner that used to operate by SEPTA and the Red Arrow lines from, I think it was put there in 1963, if I recall. That's when they got them from the North Shore, and they were retired in 1978. And then eventually the other car went back to the Illinois Railroad Museum, where there it's restored as it looked under the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee. There's your volunteer again. He kind of pushed us, and I said, well, yeah, if you want to run the PCC, we'd like to see it. So out it goes, single ending and all. So it could only run one way. But they sent it out anyway. There he is. Of course, we were all, if you see there's nobody else in there, we were just kind of crammed to the front here. It's a special ride, okay? But it looks nice, really does, you know? They do the best they can with what limited resources they have. You always have to give them credit, okay? And that, I believe, yes, that is the end of our show. Okay?
Well, it was very good, I trust. Yes. Okay, yeah. Anyone have any comments?
Very nice.
Any questions?
Great show.
Mute.
Too boring?
Very good show, yes. I enjoyed that.
Was it
I
too
rode-
boring?
Made it to the
Yeah,
Del
very
Mar
nice.
before it closed.
I was stationed in San Diego in the Navy 1980, 82 when I rode the system when it first opened.
Oh, that was good.
Must have been
All
nice.
those cars.
Did you go to Tijuana?
Yes, I went to San Isidro one couple
Yeah.
of times.
I took the Tijuana Trolley. The Tijuana.
I didn't.
Right.
They didn't have one
Oh,
when I
I
went
rode
there.
on that trolley myself, and I walked across to Tijuana back in, this was in 91, and it allowed me, all I had to do was to show my driver's license to get back into the States. So I just walked across into Mexico and walked around a little ways, but I rode the whole trolley there down to the Tijuana, to the Mexican border back then when I was in San
I was
Diego.
in Navy. I was in uniform, so the
I was
border
on vacation.
patrol guys
Right,
let me both ways.
right. Very
In fact,
good.
that San
Yeah, that
Diego
was a great show.
trolley car looked
I wanna
really
go back.
familiar to me. I remember riding that in 1981. We rode it down to pretty much the border, to the border with Tijuana, and then from there we did like you did. We actually took a bus over the border into Tijuana, and the same thing. We had to go through the border crossing, and I guess basically just show our license or even just state ID to get back to the States. It wasn't too big of a deal, but boy, there were plenty of people crossing over both ways in both directions of the border.
Oh,
What?
The trolleys were brand new at that time, and I remember they had signs on the inside of them stating, high performance vehicle, hold tightly. And they moved, I gotta admit, but from San Diego down, I think it was San Ysidro. That's about as far as the trolley
Yes.
went.
Yeah,
Yeah, San Ysidro crossing.
Yep, it was San Ysidro.
one of the
remember.
original operators came out with a book on the trolley. I have it somewhere. I
Oh,
got it autographed.
nice.
Yeah. And I
You
got a
bought
book,
it at a meeting?
I got a book somewhere on the Pacific Electric.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have one.
Henry Huntington.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
He was the mover and shaker,
Yeah.
Henry Huntington.
Mm,
The other interesting thing about the program was the trolleybus system in Dayton.
Oh,
Mm.
I was
Too
in
bad
Dayton.
it had gotten hit so hard by that, by the tornado.
do you recall when that happened? The night that happened, they had
How did you mention this?
there was a TV weatherman who had a studio in his house in Dayton. He had live on the spot reporting about it as it was going on. And he said, I don't know if I'm going to lose my house or not.
Yeah.
Oh,
But anyway, he stayed online for hours and hours and hours because he had all the radar and everything showing exactly where it was going, which streets to evacuate, which ones to stay away from. It was just a crazy night. Okay. And the guy at the hotel was telling us that he had 60 guests. It was a Red Roof Inn we stayed at.
Mm.
Still there. We're going to stay there again this summer. But he had about 60 guests. He had to get everybody out of their room and bring them down to the laundry room in the basement. Of course,
Wow.
these are people from all over the country. They're like, what the hell's going on? Oh, we got a tornado coming. They're like, what?
oops.
So he said what happened, they wouldn't stay in there. They were so curious to see what was going on. Some of them went in there, some of them stayed out. He said we all stood outside because they're sort of on a bluff on I-75. It's in a cut to the next side, okay? And they could see the swirl cloud coming at them. And he said, will you guys go inside and take cover or whatever? And they wouldn't do it. He said, so we watched the cane came at it, he said, and then it turned left and went right in front of us. It went across the highway, he said, to the other hotel. That one kind of blew up like a dust ball, not with the guests in it. There were no guests in it, thank God. It was being rebuilt. But what had been rebuilt was destroyed, okay? So he said, then we were looking at this for about 2 hours, he said, and then finally after it was over, he said, as he put it, he said, there wasn't a dry eye in the house after that, okay? But I mean, as far as trolley buses, I saw the supervisor and he wasn't laughing at me. He was very apologetic. He said,
Yeah.
we're hoping to make this a big show for you. He said, unfortunately, we just can't do anything for you. So that's why we wound up spending 3 days in Cincinnati with the streetcar, which gave me a chance to take probably too many pictures of the streetcar.
Does that Cincinnati streetcar go anywhere near the old Union Station? Or
No.
is it?
It just goes in a loop through downtown Cincinnati. That's all it was. Okay.
Oh,
It's got nothing to do with SORTA, unfortunately, though, like I said, SORTA may take it over. But it was built as a development tool for the over the Rhine
I see.
neighborhood. Okay. So it's kind of the same idea that they've talked about. Actually, what was his name? Diamond? Doug Diamond, was it? The guy in Brooklyn?
yes,
Same.
he passed away.
Yeah.
Bob Diamond.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the one that wanted to do the streetcar for Red Hook there.
Yeah.
It's kind
Whatever
of
happened to that?
but it was actually done. Okay.
Yeah, whatever happened to that? The one in Brooklyn.
Politics, basically the same thing that it didn't kill the one in Cincinnati, but what it has done, it's killed its ability to grow.
Hmm.
They have two leads for branches they want to build. One is to a casino. They're not going to do that now. And they wanted to make it sort of a starter line for a possible rail system around Cincinnati. Okay. But with the politics around Cincinnati, that's not going to happen.
What a shame.
I'm sure you guys much know from ERA if you've seen him, and if you've seen him on Zoom, he organizes a lot of the Zoom activities for a lot of organizations. His name is Paul Grether, if you've ever seen him. Okay, guy named Paul Grether. And he was the guy that ran the Cincinnati Bell streetcar when it first opened for about the first 4 years. He did a great job. The whole thing from A to Z, he did a magnificent job. And now they just don't seem to care about it. So, like I said, they got the same streetcars they do in Cincinnati as they have in Kansas City. And you go to Kansas City, it looks and they're whatever, but they're actually going to build a couple of lines. They're already getting ready to start construction on the first expansion. Okay.
Oh, in Kansas City, because right now it just goes up and down Main Street.
Right. They're going to extend that over part of the old Kansas City public service system. I think they're going to the country club, which is where it ended. Okay. So anyway.
I'm glad you rode the Delmar Loop before it shut down.
Yeah.
Well, again, we had to make a special arrangement to do that. I swear to God, this little trip that Mike and I made it had just as much engineering done to it as any ERA convention they would talk to. Okay. We had to call everybody to see something, make dates, make arrangements, make time, everything. Okay. So like I say, it was kind of a private version of an ERA convention.
You showed one picture of that bridge, the railroad bridge at Thieves, Illinois. My grandfather was resident engineer when that was built in 1902.
Really?
And that was when Thieves was actually a town. You showed all the flooding. It flooded so many times they could no longer get any money from FEMA to rebuild, so they just destroyed the whole town.
Yeah.
There's a little town on the up on the bluffs.
Yeah.
The old courthouse is still there, but the lower part, that used to be an actual town.
Yeah, that's as significant as any bridge over the Mississippi there is. You know, and like I said, that's the Union Pacific's main line from Texas to St. Louis.
And that put Thieves out of business as a riverboat town.
Yeah.
Because once the railroad went through, there was no more need for it to be a terminal for the steamboats.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That was I believe that was the Missouri Pacific back then, was it not?
There was Missouri Pacific, and then the one along the riverfront was what was that? There was the Illinois Central. And there was another one, was it the CNEI? There was another one that went right along the riverfront, and they called that the mud branch because it was always being flooded. And there was a kind of a bypass that would go up to the Missouri Pacific line that went over the bridge.
Yeah.
To a place called Ilmo, which is for Illinois and Missouri.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
which was on the Missouri side.
When I was
by
there,
the way, did you know that part of that, is it they call it Metro Link in Illinois and Missouri, and between Missouri and Illinois, that's Metro Link? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, St. Louis Metro Link.
I used it in 15. I went to a convention at a hotel by the old Union Station. So I used it to come in from the airport. I made use of that. It was very convenient.
Yeah.
Got right off. It was an elevator, got right out. Do you know the other line that goes off? You know, there's a branch that goes off. That's partly in a subway. Did you know there's another subway underground section in addition to downtown? I noticed that.
That's the only other two subway stations there are, and they're under a hill basically. They're under a college campus. So rather than construct open through the college campus, they wanted us to do tunnels. So that's why they did tunnels. It's under two hills. Okay.
Oh, one more thing about Thieves, Illinois. If you've ever seen either version of the movie Showboat, the Showboat in that, it was a novel, and then they made it into two different movies. Its home port was in Thieves, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
The Cotton Blossom, its home port was Thieves, Illinois.
Wow.
Yeah.
So while I see Cora, did you ever talk to the guy in Kansas City?
Not yet. I have his phone number. I don't know when I'm going to get back there.
Well, don't be shy. Don't take them so serious, because they're not very sharp. They're not Easterners there. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, well, they have right now because of the pandemic. That museum is it's only open limited times and only a certain number of people on any day. So you know, I figure when it opens up again, I'll go and I'll visit them. You know, my cousin who lives near Kansas City, I have an open invitation from him to visit either there or St. Louis, because he goes back and forth between the two places.
I'm already committed to do a show for the Hoosier Traction Meet, which is August 21st and 22nd, I believe. It's going to be held in Dayton because they think they're going to get more response in Dayton than they will in Indianapolis. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in the state of Indiana, they still have some pretty severe restrictions for meetings in the state of Indiana, but they don't in Ohio, so they can have the live meetings in Ohio. Okay? So anyway, I'm already committed to do a show for them. Of course, it's about Boston for what it's worth. But anyway, the point is they're going to have a fan trip with the trolley buses on the Sunday after the meet, because the general manager of the Miami Valley RTA is a big rail fan. He's going to join us on the meet, and then they're going to have the historic trolleybus fleet on the Sunday wandering around, including including the dual modes. They're trying to make a big show out of the dual modes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
This will be in August.
What's that?
This will be in August.
August 21st, 22nd. The fan trip's on the 23rd, I believe, which is a Sunday. Okay. Well, of course, that's kind of chancy as it is. And I'm getting all excited. I'm trying to make a plan for a 2-week trip out of it, because I'm going to take the trouble to drive from here in New England out to Dayton and back, and I want to make some stops. So one of the things I wanted to do for sure is the Q line in Detroit, either to or home. Okay. And I got shot down because the Q line people tell me that's been closed since March of 2020, and they don't know yet when it's going to reopen. They said it might be open by then, it might not. Don't plan on it. And basically that's what I'm hearing everywhere. Nobody seems to know yet. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think things should be opening up by around September. We hope things should be
I
opening
originally wanted to join this trip to go to Toronto to celebrate the TTC centennial of September the 1st, 2021, because the TTC's date of start was September 1st of 1921. Okay.
Oh.
So I wanted to make a big deal and have a photo op with Kevin McCall, who's a big rail fan up in Toronto there with TTS. He and I were going to have a photo op shaking hands at Lauren Young on September 1st, 2021. But he says, no way. He says, Canada's not opening the border.
Yeah.
So he's not even sure they're going to open it next year. Okay.
I spoke to my travel agent today.
I'll tell you how bad it is. I'm vaccinated. Look, I'm sure, hopefully, many
I am too. Most people are.
If I do go to Toronto and I get through the border, they still make me quarantine for 7 days, even though I'm vaccinated.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, I just spoke to my travel agent today. I have a cruise travel agent. She's outside. She lives in Welland, near the Welland Canal.
Mm-hmm.
And they're locked down again through May 21st. They only had 1.5 million vaccinations for 38 million people.
Yeah.
Wants to hang Trudeau, the prime minister. They don't know what's going on. And they've got the very serious UK strain that's killing a lot of people. And some people turning away at hospitals saying, you don't look that sick. Average of 2 to 4 people are dying a day of COVID-19.
Oh.
They can't even get hospitalized. It's really and let me tell you, no one's going anywhere in and out of Canada for some time.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
I don't know you that well, George. I just met you here. Obviously, I would make sure you can get your money back at any reservations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Canada's become a third world country right now.
I got a letter from Andrew Grawl's outfit. You know, the New York Metropolitan bus people there, whatever they are, NMRBA, and they want to have a trip to Ottawa on August 13th. Okay. And I sent him an email right away, and I told him what I learned, and I said, I don't think any way. I don't know what you're gonna do, but no way. You know?
That'd be like the charge of life brigade. Go China, not now.
Yeah.
I don't even know about next year.
The best we do. Every month I have a virtual meeting with the Toronto Transportation Society.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's Kevin Nicole's outfit. Okay, I try to be there to participate in their meetings. I gave them one show already about Boston, the one from the traction meet from 2019, but you guys haven't seen
Good.
it. I don't know if you really want to see it. It's long and detailed about the Green Line. But anyway,
Oh,
what I did is I just for him, I got all my Trolleybus pictures from the TTC out of the archive, scanned them all, and made a show up because I said, look, here's what you do. It's the TTC Centennial, so why don't you have a bunch of shows online about the TTC over its 100 years of operation? You can have one about streetcars, one about subways. Of course, they're all bus guys. They'd love to have many shows about buses. I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what. I'll do the pictures about the trolley buses because Toronto used to have trolley buses till 1992, right? I got a pretty large collection. Here it is, you know. So I don't know if he's going to do it. He's still hoping to have a live meeting by the summer.
oh yeah.
I doubt it, you know. It's really sad. It really is. So
Yeah.
anyway, so look at, if you want to do more shows like this for the RE, like I said, the door is open anytime. What I'd like to do more shows of, I mean, it's nice to do a transit show like that, if only because you happen to see it when I was there in June of 2019, kind of by accident. There's a second show that's a sister to this one that I did in September 2019. That trip, I did a very little of Cleveland, a couple of stations. I did what I could with 3.5 hours in Detroit. So I did get the Q1 trolley, but only about 3/4 of it because downtown they had some kind of a festival. So the trolley wasn't open. It was only going down to what they call the Little Caesars arena there. So they weren't going all the way down to the end. And I couldn't see the Detroit People Mover at all. Okay. There's a lot of things I didn't get to. That's why I want to go back there. I tried to get to Kenosha, Wisconsin. That was closed Labor Day Sunday. They had it closed for something called the Cheese Plaza. Get that. So that whole weekend, the trolley was closed when I was going to be there. No trolleys. I could see the trolleys, but nothing was moving. Okay. And then I went to the IRM and I spent 3 days at the Chicago Transit Authority to get upgrade pictures from current day versus I've got a lot of slides of the CTA from the 80s and 90s, you know, but that's all ancient history now. Okay. And then on the way back home, I went to Indianapolis to do my show for 2 days. So I didn't do anything there. Then I stopped again at Pittsburgh on the way home. And that's when I did the Red Line in Pittsburgh. Okay. So that's the second show. It's not even really put together, but I could do that another time for you guys. Okay.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
What I'd like to do also is the next time I want to do a railroad show, I'll probably put something together and I'll let you know what you got to do. Set a date. So, you know, if it's going to be live, I'd like doing June. That worked great for us. But
that would
when
be
it's going to happen, I don't know.
June of 22?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be June 21.
No.
No, June of 2022 if it's live, okay? If you want to do a virtual show, I could do that anytime if you want something else in between.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch.
So what I'll try to do is I'll try to get a railroad show that's available. If you need it before that, that's what I'll do. And I'll do Midwest 2, if we do it live, that would be June of 2022, okay?
Right.
But if nothing happens and you don't need another show before that, I'll do the railroad one in June of 2022. And
I see.
We'll do the Midwest one on a future date.
Beautiful.
I hope it won't be anytime soon. I'll put it that way. And what I hope is that you all stay well until we see each other again.
You do the same, George. Thanks a lot.
You too, George.
Whenever that might be, okay? And Cara, please don't